Atherton Street Memorial was a recreation of a footprint of a house to memorialise the Fitzroy slums that no longer exist. When the slums were demolished, so were many of the streets. So it was reinventing a street that is no longer there. No one can look up on a Melways or use their GPS to find Atherton Street. So that was a really important part of creating that ghostly effect, I guess, to bring back a street. The intention was to engage the local community, the current residents of Atherton Gardens housing estate. Ultimately, it was a happening. It occurred over a weekend. The installation, the event, and I guess the deinstallation of the work. So it was very temporary. I was drawn to the location because of the significant change, I guess, because of the social change that occurred to deem that site a slum. Probably the social injustice that I viewed was incorporated in that decision. I chose the site because now it belongs to a whole different group of people. And in fact, the housing estate can probably track global conflict through the movement of refugees through the site. So I guess I was interested in exploring the engagement of the existing community with the memory. In fact, it drew people whose memories were very tied to the Fitzroy slums rather than the local community. The kids certainly engaged while I was installing. I think the work was important to recreate and recognise a major shift that had occurred in a community, and up until that point I felt had gone fairly unrecognised. The event occurred on probably Melbourne's worst September afternoon. It was windy, it was tempestuous, stormy, and in some way that built into the work as a happening too, perhaps signifying the emotion that was connected to the site. Tony Birch did a book reading at the site. He read an excerpt from his novel Shadowboxing. The house that I recreated belonged to Tony's grandmother, which was a happy coincidence. We also had an operatic trio sing a couple of songs. One of the songs selected was from Nabucco. It was Va Pensiero, which is a freedom fighters song, Italian freedom fighters song, and from some of my research, it was a song that would have been familiar in the streets of Fitzroy prior to the demolition of the slums. There was a lot of protest around the time that the housing estate was being constructed. A lot of protest as the waves of demolition occurred. So it had an enormous amount of protest at the time, probably the late 70s, early 80s. So I felt like we needed to bring the memory into the present. When I was working on Atherton Street, I realised that creating a footprint was a beautiful way. A footprint of a house that had been demolished was a beautiful way to memorialise the existence of a community. The impact of Atherton Street, certainly on the site, was only ever intended to be temporary, to be like a fleeting memory that wasn't completely filled out, that wasn't completely articulated. It was just an opportunity to have an insight into what may have been previously on the site. In terms of the impact on the people who attended, I think it will have an ongoing effect in their minds as a fleeting memory, I hope.